Hi, it's Miss Loisel and Hans Dietrich here with you. He's a world traveler and researcher of esoteric topics, ancient sites and civilizations, and occult symbolism. He's an award-winning graphic and presentation designer, book writer, and much more. He likes to speak on Buddhist cultural mysticism, stuff that's connected to the Dropa stones and Dropa nomadic people and their connection to Sirius. He also speaks about the magic of symbols throughout time, the mysteries of Khemit, Egypt before the Greeks, and he connects the ancient secrets of Bhutan, China, Nepal, Tibet, and Sirius. His website is the megalithic You can also find his publications on lulu.com. He has a few books that he's written on the lost mysteries of Khemit, the magic of symbols, and also on Dropa legends and lore. He's the world traveler. You can see on his website on megalithic his travels and adventure portfolio, and you see some pictures from Peru, Egypt, Mexico, Nepal, and Bhutan. And the picture that I have on here is a picture of a buy disc on the thumbnail. So, Hans, let's give it up for Hans.
Hello. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm excited.
Yeah, you're welcome. Happy to have you here.
So, what shall we dive into?
Yeah. So, if you want to tell us a little bit about you and how you got interested in the ancient secrets, is it something that you grew up in Nepal learning about, or like when did it happen?
Not really. So a little bit about me. I'm Hans Dietrich. I'm a award-winning graphic designer. I do presentation design for a lot of companies, but I also study esoteric research. And so I started getting into ancient sites and civilizations. Like you said, Buddhist cultural mysticism, Khemit, Egypt before the Greeks. And because I work in graphics, I do a lot with symbology and symbols. And it's interesting because a lot of our symbols have come to us from ancient times and we're still using them today. And so I was very intrigued by why we're still using a lot of these ancient symbols. But as far as Buddhist cultural mysticism, so as I said, I grew up in Nepal from pretty much the age of 4 until I was 19. Ended up going to university for graphic design, multimedia, and I wanted to go back to Nepal my third year to do an internship. So I ended up back in Nepal doing an internship for a large format print company. We were basically designing and printing all the billboards and signage for the local hotels, alcohol and tobacco companies, the airports, so on and so forth. But while I was there, I was waiting for a special access permit to go to Bhutan. Bhutan is notoriously difficult to get into.
Yes.
It costs anywhere from $300 to $600 a day for your visa. You have to be invited, even though you apply for a visa, they invite you. And you're allowed 10 days in the country. You're allowed to go from Paro, which is where you land, to Thimphu, the capital, and then from Thimphu to Bhutan, which is about halfway through the country. And the Bhutan's not very big. But it takes over 12 hours to drive from Thimphu to Bhutan, even though it's about 100 miles.
Wow.
The roads just wind up and down the mountains, and you could literally look at one of the zongs or one of the monasteries across the valley from you and go, oh, we're almost there. 4 hours later, you end up at it because you have to go all the way down to the river, cross the river, all the way halfway up the next mountain, because they don't do like bridge systems across valleys. They pretty much run the roads all along the land. So yeah, it's that was interesting. My father was working in Bhutan at the time, and so he was trying to arrange a special access permit where I would have 2 months to study in the monasteries because I was very interested in Buddhist cultural mysticism, ancient art, and architecture. And while I was there, I had to hire a tutor, and he's kind of my teacher, my tutor, and also my translator in an aspect because they speak Tibetan, Nepalese, and English in Bhutan, but not so much English.
Okay.
So I speak a little bit of Nepalese. I mean, I grew up around it. I understand it, but it wasn't something that, I became fluent at. But so he would translate a lot of the artwork that we would see on the walls in these monasteries from Tibetan into Nepalese and English for me. And so I started taking down notes and got into a lot of what he was talking about. It wasn't until many years later that I decided I was going to start researching into some of these topics a little bit more. Around 2018, a friend of mine challenged me to start looking into the Dropa stones. I wasn't too keen on the story because everything that's out there on the internet is the same story rehashed over and over and over again. Everybody's podcasts, everybody's documentaries, everybody's blogs, even Wikipedia, they all tell the same story. And I was like, there's got to be more here. There has to be more here. And so I came across a video from around 2004. It was called UFO Files. One of their episodes was starring David Sereda, Hartwig Hausdorff, and Richard Dolan. And they were talking about the Dropa. And they got into some of the origins of where the Dropa came from, where the story came from. But as I started researching more into it, I realized that sadly, with a lot of these shows that we watch on Gaia or History Channel and whatnot, they're all handed a script and they're told to comment on the script without really diving deep into research. And so they were just repeating this same story ad nauseum. And I'm like, okay, there has to be more here.
Yeah.
So I started looking into the origins of where this story came from. And according to the show, it came out of 3 publications from 1962. One was called Das Vegetarische Universum, which was a German publication called The Vegetarian Universe. Another one was the Belgian UFO.
The Vegetarian Universe.
And the third was Sputnik magazine. And Sputnik comes out of Russia. It's very popularized. In fact, from about 1960 to current day, you can find every single publication in PDF form in one language or another. And I couldn't find any information. I could not find Vegetarian Universe. I could not find the Belgian UFO Files or the Belgian UFO Bulletin. And even looking in Sputnik magazine from 1962, I found absolutely nothing related to the Dropa. And so I'm like, okay, either this is misdirection or these people just have not done their research. And I kind of concluded it was a bit of both.
Both, yeah.
And so from that point, I was also directed toward Eric von Daniken's
studies.
Initial publication of what is it? No, it's spacing it.
He's a great researcher. That Dutch man, he's come up with a lot that other people have no knowledge of at all, and we don't know where he gets it, but he brings things to light. So it's not surprising that you found him.
Well, this is interesting because his first publication of Chariots of the Gods was 1968. And guess what? There's no information on the Dropa in there either. So, I was scratching my head going, well, why are we being told that this is the origin of these stories when none of these stories are found in any of these origins? I still have never found a publication called Vegetarian Universe. I found reference to it, but I've never found it. And as I was kept on searching, basically through the archives that I was looking through, I found a 1964 edition of a German publication, more of a newspaper, called UFO Nachrichten. And so in German, that translates to the UFO Bulletin. And I went, maybe this is similar to the UFO Bulletin of Belgium, because Belgium and Germany both speak the Germanic language. And so looking through that, I realized that this possibly was one of the first origin stories of where the story of the Dropa came from.
And do you speak German?
A little bit, yeah.
Oh, so that's how you're able to read it?
Yeah, so I read through it, and I was fascinated because it told the same story that these 3 researchers in the UFO Files told. The story, for your audience, simplified. In 1932, a group of Chinese archaeologists ended up in a remote region, which at that point would have been far eastern Com Tibet, but is now basically central China. And in this region is the Bayan Kara Ula and Bayan Harshan mountain ranges. And what's fascinating about this area is it's very dry, it's very high altitude. And like areas of Nepal on the Tibetan border, it's covered with caving systems.
Wow.
And so in Nepal, in this area called Dolpo and Mustang, you have these very high altitude caves that you have to climb up to get into. And as they've been discovering artifacts in them from manuscripts, scrolls, petroglyphs on the walls, mummified remains, they started realizing that these caving systems basically had been occupied for the last 14 plus thousand years. And so this really fascinated me, because here we're being told of another caving system in the Bayan Kara Ula around Bayan Harshan, which is one of the mountains in this range, that also had a series of caves. And so this character, his name is Chipute, but that actually is not his name. We'll get into that. And his team ended up in the Bayan Kara Ula, and they ended up in a cave structure, basically, that, as it's described, had been hewn out of the bedrock. And so the walls of the cave were perfectly straight. The ceilings were perfectly straight. The floor was perfectly straight, as if some sort of machinery had cut these caves out.
Wow.
It's fascinating, because you go to places like Peru and you end up at Napa Iglesia, Napa Huaca, which is, it's outside of Ollantaytambo as you're kind of on the path going toward Machu Picchu. And it's about 1,000 to 2,000 feet up on this hillside of all shale rock. There's, outside of the road that drives by it, there's nothing there.
Really?
Yet, when you go up to this spot, you see 3 different types of the ancient Peruvian Inca or pre-Inca art, basically carvings and art. It is art in a sense.
Art form.
Yeah, but they're carving into the rock. And so part of the carving into the rock is using the natural rock the way it is and carving into that. Another part is doing removals, and another part is what the Inca would do, and they would come in and rebuild some of these structures their own means. And Napa Huaca, Napa Iglesia is interesting, because in the cave on the back wall is a section of wall that's probably, I would say, a little over 100 feet long, perfectly flat, and in it are 3 alcoves that go back, which represent, the past, present, and the future. And the shamans will go there and do their ceremonies. But it begs the question, how are they cutting out of the bedrock? I mean, it's perfectly flat,
Who knows?
90-degree angles. Who knows?
It's like the pyramids. It's before our time.
Right. It's before our time. I'm often laughed at, because people will say, "Oh, we have no evidence of ancient machinery or ancient tools or any of this stuff." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's right here in the rock."
Yeah,
The evidence
absolutely.
is the finished work. And so this cave in Peru reminded me a lot of caves in India. There's a series of caves in Babar, India, called the Barbara Caves. They're in Bihar. And these also are cut out of the bedrock, and they have perfect 90-degree angle corners. One of the caves has a perfect domed ceiling, like half circle dome ceiling. It's cut out of the bedrock, and nobody knows how or when these structures were cut. So hearing of this cave in Bayan Kara Ula, around the Bayan Harshan mountain, I started to see some similarities. So Chipute and his team go into this cave. They find on the wall petroglyphs that show the Sirius and Canis Major star system, and a dotted line from that going to a mountain range. This is in the petroglyphs. And I find it because the brightest star in Canis Major, the dog constellation, is Sirius, the dog star. It's interesting because you look at Sirius FM or Sirius TV or Sirius as a company itself. What is their logo getting into symbology? It's a dog with a star for its eye. And so this is the dog star. And it's interesting that Sirius is known in many cultures to be associated with dogs. In the Middle East, it rises around the dog days of summer. It rises basically at the end of July, early August. And so this is when Muslims go to Mecca to do their Hajj. And so they will go around the Kaaba building, which is a black stone building, but it's in a perfect square, and it's draped with Muslim cloth and writing. But they will raise up the eastern corner, which looks at Sirius rising in the east during the Hajj, and in it is basically a piece of meteorite called the Kaaba stone, and they say that this meteorite came from Sirius. So we'll get back into that in a second. So back to Bayan Kara Ula. At the back of the cave, they find mummified and skeletal remains, row upon row, of short in stature people, humanoids, slightly elongated skulls, although in the documentary, Hartwig Hausdorff laughs and says they had huge, clumsy heads, but in reality, no, they didn't.
Okay.
And buried with them was one circular disc about a foot wide, with spiraling glyphic writing that came out of the center. Upon further excavation, they find a total of 716 other discs, which is interesting because when you start looking into bi or B discs in China, they don't really know what their origins are. The majority of them have absolutely no writing on them, but some do. And these writings usually are historical events or good luck charms, magic, spells, you name it. So one of the discs has writing on it. We don't know anything about any of the other discs because it's not mentioned, other than they found 716 in total. For your audience, a bi disc is this. This is a B disc or a bi disc. This actually has Proto-Chinese glyphic writing on it, so this predates the current script of China. And I've tried to have this translated. I've used AI to try and translate it. I had a Chinese scholar when I was in LA the last time actually look at some of the glyphs on it, and he said this is a good luck charm. This came.
Cool.
I was about 15. A family friend of ours in Hong Kong gave me 2 of these. I have no idea the origin of it, but it's made out of jade. However, in the story, the discs are made out of jadeite. And jadeite is interesting because it's not jade. It's more like a granite. And it has jade infused in it, and it also has mercury and cobalt infused in it.
Wow.
So, according to the story, one of these discs around the mid-1960s, and this is why the story came out, ended up in Russia for testing. And so they took oscillation testing on it to see if it would hold a charge and to see if it would hold energy or information. And they also took samples of the stone, and this is how they realized it was jadeite. And what's interesting is when you have compounds of jade, a crystal, under pressure in a granite form, it creates a piezoelectric effect. But if it's also mixed with cobalt and mercury, now you have a plasma piezoelectric effect. And this is
how about that?
This is very similar to what's in our phones, our lithium ion batteries, or in a Tesla car, it's a cobalt lithium battery. And so it has the ability to hold a charge. And it's funny because in this documentary, they're like, oh, they put it on a record player and tried to play it. And it's like,
that's not it. It's
not
used for energy.
That's not how you do oscillation testing. You would basically hook up electrodes to it and pulse it with energy and see if it could hold a charge. And they discovered that it had been holding a charge for a very long time, as if it had been around gobs of electromagnetic information or electromagnetic pulses.
Okay.
So in 1950, China swept through Tibet, destroyed a lot of the monasteries, pushed a lot of people into becoming nomads. They would have definitely swept through the Bayankara Ula first, because that's what we call Far Eastern Kham Tibet. The Kham are interesting. They're a lot older than the Tibetan culture, and they stretch from basically, I would say Egypt, but some of the oldest Kham places that we found are actually in Iran. And they stretch all the way across South Asia, all the way down into Indonesia, and all the way up further into China on the eastern coast. And so, again, super fascinated. Who are the Kham people? How old are they? How long are they in the region? Right. In 1958, so we got 30, 38, 32, 38, 48, 58. Yeah, so 20 years later, another researcher at the Beijing Academy of Sciences, this is where all the stuff in the cave ended up at, or what Chipute and his team could bring back to Beijing. They took it to the Beijing Academy of Sciences, and they put it in ancient historical archives. So about 20 years later, another researcher named Sung Un Nui, again, not his name or her name.
It's a mouthful.
Oh, right. And this is why I think a lot of the research has dropped, and I'll get into that in a second. But Sung Un Nui ends up translating what's on the disc. Well, how do you translate an alien language? You'd have to have a cipher. So my first thinking is, well, maybe what they're translating actually isn't from an alien race, but it possibly could be the people of the region describing an event that they saw. And this is interesting
Ah,
because in UFO Nachrichten, that's exactly what the translation says that Sungun Nui came up with. And so it says that the Dropa came down from the clouds in their winged gliders, 10
flying.
10 times before the sunset. The locals hid in the cave until they realized this time that the Dropa came with peaceful intentions. And so that doesn't sound like the translation of an alien race. It sounds like the translation of a local group of people who had written an event on this disc.
Yes.
It's fascinating because the words "this time" references that there's a possibility that they had come before. And so this gets into other stories around the Dropa that these three researchers, I love them all, but they concluded at the end of the series or the end of the episode that all this must have been hoaxed because there's no way to research any of it. They can't find anybody named Chipute or Sungun Nui or any of these people. Do they even exist?
Yeah.
And the Beijing Academy of Sciences doesn't exist either. Well, this is where my research took its turn. So I started looking at transliteration. So transliteration is basically a game of intellectual telephone. I speak one language, you speak a different language. You're telling me something in your language that I'm trying to tell people in my language. And so pronunciations, enunciations all start to change.
Spelling. Yeah.
Right. So here we have a story coming out of China, translated into German, translated from German. Again, so I guess I should backtrack a little bit. After I found UFO Nachrichten, I discovered a 1967 publication of Sputnik magazine in French that talks about the Dropa stones. And it literally is almost verbatim the same story that you find in UFO Nachrichten. And so at the beginning of UFO Nachrichten, it says, this story came from a publication called Vegetarian Universe. Never found this publication. It doesn't give a date of the publication. It doesn't give in anything that you can research the publication. So there's no date, there's no publication number, nothing. It just says UFO or
Vegetarian Universe.
Yeah. So the Sputnik article says the same thing, but the different Sputnik article is in the translation, the names are a little bit different. And it says the Dropa came down from the clouds in their craft. Well, craft could be singular or it could be multiple. And 10 times before the sunset, the villagers hid in the cave. So they've flipped that. Instead of the craft coming down 10 times, now you have the villagers hiding in the caves 10 times. So they're leaving and coming back. But again, it says they came out when they realized this time the Dropa came with peaceful intentions. So here we have a similar transliteration of what was on the disc. And then it goes on to describe this instance where one of the discs ended up in Russia for further testing. But outside of that, we don't know where any of it went. So I started looking at this under the guise of transliteration. What could be changed here throughout different languages? Because we have, again, Chinese story translated into German, German into Russian, Russian into French, French into English. All of these languages have different syntax, have different context. So an intellectual game of telephone definitely could be taking place. So I started looking at the names. And the first name I looked at was Chipute. Well, this is not a Chinese name. And great for the research. They also describe this is not a Chinese name. So what is similar to it through a transliterated ear that could be plausible? Well, Chipute, Chipu sounds a lot like Sifu. And Sifu in China means teacher or master. So this would be Master Te. Well, if you look up Te is a popular name in China, but it has been transliterated so it's more pronounceable in English. It's actually Techu. So here we have Master Techu and his archaeological team. Well, this is probably where we should start doing research into finding out if there was a teacher named Techu or Te at the Beijing Academy of Sciences. Sungun Nui, also not a Chinese name. However, it's very close to Seung Nguyen, which is a Vietnamese Chinese name. And during this time, there were a lot of what they called Hao Chinese, which were Vietnamese Chinese living in China in the 1950s. And so perhaps Sung Un Nui or Sun Nguyen was a professor researching into cultural languages. We're told that the glyphic writing looked alien. Well, yeah, if you're a Chinese scholar and you're looking at writing in a foreign language, it's going to look alien to you. But the only way that you're going to be able to translate this is if you have a cipher. And so I'm sure over the course of the 20 years between the discs were recovered and Siu Nguyen actually did the research behind what was on the discs, he or she possibly discovered other cultural languages of the region.
And what's the cipher?
Well, cipher would be basically a script, kind of like the Rosetta Stone. So
like a translator.
It would be in hieroglyphic or diaretic language, but it also matches with Greek or Aramaic in a sense.
Yeah. Okay.
So that would be a cipher. But in alien language, where would you get the cipher? How would you be able to translate?
Missing key.
Literally, it would be an impossibility. And so that was fascinating to me. Then I started looking into the Beijing Academy of Sciences, and you know what? It doesn't exist. Why? Because in 1949, it was renamed the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing.
Oh.
The Beijing Academy of Sciences, you're not going to find it because it doesn't exist in modern times. And so again, I'm like, wow, these researchers really did not dive very deep underneath the surface. And so I just kept researching and researching. Well, another transliterated name is the name Dropa. So in Far Eastern Kham Tibet, these people are called the Dropa. In Central Tibet, they're called the Zopa, D-Z-O-P-A, Zopa.
Oh.
In Bhutan, they're called the Drokpa. And the further west you go, they become the Brokpa. And this is a group of nomadic people from Far Eastern Kham Tibet. They're all about 4 foot tall in stature. They're really short people. They have blue and green eyes and auburn hair, similar to the color of your hair, and a darker orange complexion of their skin. They're completely nomadic. They do not speak Tibetan. They do not speak Chinese. They do not speak Nepalese. They speak a language that's older than Sanskrit called Shina.
Really?
Shina has 3 different forms to it: Shina Brokskat, Brokat, and Minoriskat. And it's only spoken by 2,000 plus people who are these nomads that came out of this region of Far Eastern Tibet around 1950, when the Chinese invaded, basically, and pushed them into a nomadic lifestyle. Well, this is fascinating because here I am in Bhutan in 1998, and I'm seeing this character walk up the street in Tashigong, where my dad was living. And so I turned to Tashila, my tutor and my teacher, and I said, who are these people? Because here's this short guy, 4 foot tall. He's wearing this inverted leather apron. He's got a felted wool cap that has these 5 or 4 tendrils that stick out of it, spider caps. And what they do is when they're in the high altitude passes and it's very foggy, these tendrils will wick water away from your eyes, so you're not constantly face during the monsoon. Yeah, very. But here's this little smiley guy. He's actually on the cover of my book. And so I'm like, Tashila, who is this? And he's like, oh, these are the Drokpa. And so he takes me into one of the monastery rooms and he shows me the procession of the first, his title was Druk Gyelpo. So he's the first cloud dragon king of Bhutan. And his name was Urgen Wanchu. And in the end of the procession is this little short guy wearing his leather and his spider cap. And he's carrying in his hands a singing bowl, Buddha's singing bowl. And in it is the Sintamani stone. And I started getting even more fascinated. I'm like, well, what is the Sintamani stone? Because at this point, I'd never heard of any of this. And so this is where Buddhist cultural mysticism came into my research long before I even started getting into the Dropa research. And so the Sintamani stone appears around 20,000 BC near the summit of Mount Meru. Well, Mount Meru to the Tibetans is a very spiritual mountain. It's considered a dimensional portal, but it's also a physical mountain. It's in far western Tibet, on the border of Tibet and Ladakh. Mm-hmm. So sitting near the summit are 4 items. There's the Sintamani stone, which is a piece of meteorite that came from Sirius. This sounds familiar. This is the Mecca stone, right? This is the Kaaba stone of Mecca. It's a piece of meteorite that came from Sirius. But it's said to give its possessor longevity of life and prosperity. So it has powers. The second item in the box was known as the Vajra Dorje. And so this, actually, I have one on my shelf here. Hold on a second.
Let's see, the Vajra Dorje. All right. Hans is showing us all his props here. Yeah. So it's cool that you have all these unique stones in your stories that you're talking about. The Dropa
this is a Dorje. It's considered a thunderbolt
or lightning bolt.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But the Vajra Dorje is this. So it's
they're different.
It's 4-sided. And this represents the 4 elements, the 4 seasons, like all the 4s that go around this. And it was pretty much one of the initiating cornerstones of Vajrayana Buddhism. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the third item in the box is Buddha's singing bowl, right? Yeah. So when you oscillate it, it creates a vibrational pattern. So if you're a meditating monk and you're going into deep states of meditation, it basically will take you into a deeper state of transcendental meditation.
Yes.
Okay, so the 4th item in the box is called the Mani stone, or the Omani stone. Actually, I guess I could grab that too.
So lightning, when you think about it, it has a component of sound with thunder. Right. And the singing bowls have sounds that oscillate in frequencies. Right. So there's something to sound, because Vajrayana Buddhism, that's the lightning Buddhism, basically. Right. So there's something very pivotal to it.
So that resonates. Yeah, you're spot on. So the 4th item in the box is called the Mani stone. This is one that I had made when I was near Mount Everest. So engraved around it is Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum directly translates to the jewel within the crown, or the jewel within the sacred lotus flower, basically. And so if you start looking at your chakra points, your crown chakra is always depicted as a lotus flower. So the jewel within the lotus flower would be your pineal gland, right? Mm-hmm. So as Buddhists are basically in meditation, they will recite Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum.
Over and over.
Over and over. And this also creates a transcendental state of meditation. Well, it's interesting because your pineal gland in physical reality and the lotus flower both synthesize trace amounts of DMT.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you're a meditating monk and you haven't been polluted by, modern chemicals and whatnot, and your pineal gland is frozen and calcified, it's going to be very open, and it's going to allow you to go into deep states of transcendental meditation. And so through these states of meditation, if you're, a devout and very high-end practicing monk, you can go into what they call astral projection, where you can project your consciousness through a meditative technology across the dimensions of time and space. And so what's interesting about Mount Meru is, as a dimensional portal, its seed is deep in the earth, your root chakra, at a place that they call Shambhala. And so Shambhala is Agartha, it's the inner earth cities, it's a place deep in the earth. And then all of the 7 chakras are the different dimensional layers of the mountain, going to the crown chakra, which is said to connect to Sirius through a rainbow bridge. So the rainbow bridge could be metaphorical. When you're high up in the Tibet plateau, it's nighttime, there's no light pollution of cities. You're going to see the Milky Way stretching from the top of the mountains all the way into the east, where Sirius rises.
Yeah.
Milky Way is going to look like a beautiful rainbow of colors. And then Sirius rises on the horizon. And so you are having a direct connection through the Milky Way to Sirius from the tops of the mountains. And so this could be the metaphor of why Mount Meru connects to Sirius through a rainbow bridge.
Do you think it has something to do about the rainbow body, though, that Tibetans...
This is where, astral projection and the light form comes into play as well. And so I started asking Tashila a little bit more about about this aspect of basically meditative technology to take you into the astral realm and astral project your consciousness across time and space. And so he started teaching me about the meditator. So this was a different room in one of these Lakong's monasteries in Bhutan. And in the room of the meditator, it depicts Shiva or Siddhartha, which could be considered a similar aspect. People are like, well, why Shiva? He's a Buddha or he's a Hindu god. I'm like, no, actually, he's also a Buddhist god because he lives on Mount Kailash, which is in the middle of Tibet. This is the realm of Shiva. But depictions on this wall is of Shiva, Siddhartha, and another character called Milarepa. And they're all performing all of the acts of man. He's the fisherman, he's the farmer, he's the lover, the husband, the father, the old man, the young man, you name it. They're all, the whole wall in this room is depicted of all these different forms of the meditator. And then Tashila told me about a book. And so it's a book called the Lotus Sutra. It was discovered around 100 BC, but it could be much, much older than that. And it's all Buddhist poetry and poetic verse. So he starts telling me about the meditator. And one of the first characters that he tells me about is this character named Dropka Gyeltsen. And so Drak or Druk means dragon. So
dragon.
Yeah. So Drokpa means the people of the dragon or the people of the cloud dragon.
Oh.
Cloud dragon, right? Okay. So Druk or Drok is also the cloud dragon in Bhutan. So Dropka Gyeltsen was a monk from around 1600 current day. He was known to go into deep states of meditation where he could eventually levitate himself and his ritual instruments. And he was known to also be able to fly. And so he would go into these deep states of meditation and just lift off the ground. Well, it's interesting because Buddhism doesn't really talk about this, except one sect of Buddhism, which is called Nyingmapa Buddhism. This is where you get magic, sorcery, levitating monks, astral projection, ascended Tolku masters.
The cool stuff.
All of the stuff that's interesting in Buddhism comes out of this very small sect of Buddhism.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it was introduced to the region by this nomadic tribe of Dropa eons ago, because they were very instrumental in setting up the kingdom of Bhutan. They also translated Sanskrit into Tibetan and Hindi. And it's interesting because, as I was saying, the language that they speak, Shina, is about 2,000 years older than Sanskrit. So this is a 6,000 BC plus year old language.
I thought Sanskrit was the oldest language in the world, or Tamil. They're cousins.
Shina, much, much older.
There's much older. That we've forgotten.
That we've forgotten because there's very few people that speak it. And so Sanskrit is, there's a lot of Sanskrit scholars, Vedic scholars that get into Sanskrit because it's a very readily available language. Shina is not. Shina is similar to Thai or Spanish. It has or Latin languages, it has a male and a female tongue to it. So the Thai also does, if you say something as a male in Thai, the female will answer you in a female tongue, basically similar to Spanish. There's male and female form, but it also has 3 hierarchies. So there's a child's tongue, there's the common tongue, and then there's the royal tongue. And it's mostly a spoken language. There's not a lot of writing around what Shina actually looks like, but it does look similar to what we would associate with Farsi or Arabic today in a written.
Okay. The curvy script.
Right.
Plain script.
Yes. So back to the 4 items in the box. They then were taken from Mount Meru and taken to the sacred city of Shambhala deep within the earth. So here we have Dropka Gyeltsen able to meditate, levitate his items, fly, and possibly also anthropomorphically shapeshift into other creatures and animals, which this comes out of these legends. Yeah. In the Lotus Sutra, there are 2 chapters. One of them talks about a character named Mahamad Galgyana. And so Mahamad Galgyana was a disciple of Sakyamuni. Sakyamuni is who we call Siddhartha today. And in the West, we're told that Siddhartha was the first Buddha. But in actuality, he was probably the 100th reincarnation.
There's many. Yeah.
And even in the story of Siddhartha, he becomes the Bodhisattva because he's following another Buddha. And he realizes he wants to stay behind instead of becoming the rainbow light body. He wants to stay in physical form through compassion to help all of us through our suffering. That is what a Bodhisattva becomes. So Muhammad Galgiana one day is in deep meditation, and he's challenging himself to go into deeper states of meditation, and he wants to be able to climb the dimensional realms of Mount Meru and see if he can hear Sakyamuni's beautiful voice from the summit. The summit of Mount Meru. He hears the Buddha's voice, and then he asks, can I be granted the spiritual meditational technology to traverse across time and space the Rainbow Bridge to the land of Sirius? Or, as they call it in the poetics form, the brightest star that rises in the east. This is Sirius.
And the brightest star in the sky, correct?
Correct. So Sakyamuni grants him the permission, and he travels across the Rainbow Bridge and ends up at Sirius. Well, it's interesting because he runs into a race of giants there that think he's a small critter that they're going to squash, until one of them recognizes him as being a disciple of the great Sakyamuni Buddha. They, bid him forgiveness. They ask if he can meditate with them before he returns to the earthly realm, which he does. And upon returning to Earth, or the earthly realm, he is granted the title of Bodhisattva. Interesting, because he was also known to be able to anthropomorphically shapeshift into other creatures and animals and beings, so that he could then spread the word of the Buddha and the word of love to the rest of us.
And it's interesting because nobody can really go on Mount Meru.
Right.
Or
Mount Kailash. Yeah, very, very tragic.
Exactly. There are abodes of the gods. For some reason, the gods like being on mountains where people literally disintegrate, or they age rapidly, or just die. Nobody can make it up there for some reason.
Right.
So the fact that this one was able to communicate with the gods and become a bodhisattva from it is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And this is just one chapter in the Lotus Sutra. So another chapter that really fascinated me that Tashilo was telling me about is about another character named Gadgadsavara. And so Gadgadsavara is fascinating. This is, I think, chapter 24 in the Lotus Sutra. So one day, Manjusri, another disciple of Sakyamuni Buddha, is in deep meditation. And he's entering into the astral plane. He's never been there in his meditation before. And he meets a being there. And this being himself is Gadgadsavara. And they converse. And of course, Manjusri is thinking, maybe this is all just in my mind, I'm hallucinating while I'm in deep states of meditation. Who knows?
Yeah.
But Gadgadsavara convinces him, hey, I am actually real. And when you come out of your meditative state, you will find 7 jeweled lotus flowers sitting in front of you. And so Manjusri comes out of meditation, and sure enough, on the hillside where he's sitting are these 7 jeweled lotus flowers. So he's like, okay, this is unreal, weird. So he goes to Sakyamuni, and he says, who is Gadgadsavara, and how is he able to meet me in my meditation? And Sakyamuni says, he is a sage. He is a bodhisattva from the brightest star that rises in the east, the star of Sirius. And he has mastered the spiritual meditational technology to be able to enter the astral plane and converse with you. Well, how do I learn this technique so that I therefore can go back into the astral plane?
Great question.
And converse with him. And Sakyamuni says, well, you're uninitiated. And this is key, because you have to be initiated to go into these deep states of meditation to project. He says, but a practitioner who is initiated can guide you into a deeper state of meditation, so that then you can meet and converse with Gadgadsavara. So Manjusri does this. And it's interesting because when he ends up in the astral plane, he meets up again with Gadgadsavara, and they converse. And he challenges him. He's like, do you have the ability to come visit us in physical form? And Gadgadsavara says, yes, and I accept the challenge. So then in poetic verse, it says, Gadgadsavara and his disciples climbed atop his flying palace, a tower of 7 layers. So here you have the 7 chakras, the 7 Meru, the dimensional portal, but it's a flying palace. Okay, this is how it's described.
Oh.
Accompanied by the sounds of hundreds of thousands of musical instruments being played without players. Blink of an eye, it traverses across time and space and ends up hovering around Earth. It then descends through the clouds. Gadgadsavara and his disciples descend from the flying palace to meet with Manjusri, Sakyamuni, and all their disciples. He's described as being very short in stature, with blue within blue eyes, orange glowing skin. This is a Dropa from Sirius.
Yeah, okay. Sounds familiar. Sounds very familiar.
And he's arriving in a physical craft. Okay, this is the other fascinating part about it. He says, after they meditate together, his disciples and Sakyamuni's, he blesses Earth for being a very beautiful place, unlike the Saha realm where he comes from, which is a moon around Sirius, around one of the planets of Sirius, that was destroyed by an ancient war and left as mud, filth, dirt, and rocks. He then bids Sakyamuni, Manjusri, and their disciples farewell, and again, he and his disciples climb atop the tower of 7 layers, the flying palace, and once again, accompanied by the sounds of hundreds of thousands of musical instruments being played without players. In the blink of an eye, he traverses back across the distance of time and space and arrives back at the brightest star that rises in the east, the star of Sirius. This is an extraterrestrial visitation, right there in the pages of the Lotus Sutra.
So you found your Dropa story that you were looking for in the Lotus Sutra. You found the same peoples and more to the Dropa story that
just isn't there in any of the research. And how many people know of the Lotus Sutra? Not many, but you know, obviously it's because,
unless you're Buddhist,
right?
Even Buddhist, there's so many sutras, there's so many baskets. There's just it's so vast.
It's all poetry. It's all in this poetic verse. So you have to really read between the lines and figure out what on earth are they talking about. And once you discover that, it's just like, this is mind blowing. They're talking about a craft arriving at Earth several thousand years ago with this character from Sirius named Gadgadsavara. And the only way they could describe how the engines of this craft sounded was this cacophony of noise created by hundreds of thousands of musical instruments being played without players. It's like the orchestra, you know, warming up. It's just noise. But that's how they described it, was musical instruments being played without players. And so right here, again, in this Lotus Sutra, we have an extraterrestrial visitation from Sirius. And so Sirius ends up in a lot of their ancient scripture and ancient legend and lore, as it does with the Dropa story. And so the question is, who are the Dropa people? Well, apparently they crash landed here the second time that they arrived. So they've come once before. And in another story, it's called Sun Gods in Exile, right in the foreword of the story, the author says he's sensationalized a lot of the memoirs of his predecessor, whose name was Carl Robin Evans, who was a sociology and anthropology teacher at Oxford. Well, if you look up Carl Robin Evans at Oxford, you're not going to find him.
No.
But in the 1940s, you are going to find a Carl Evans.
Oh.
The researchers called him Carol Robin Evans because he spells his name K-A-R-Y-L, right?
Like German.
Which is the German spelling of Carl. But they're calling him Carol. Well, you're not going to find a Carol Robin Evans. You're going to find Carl Evans. And he was a professor of sociology and anthropology. And so it's interesting reading this book because you can definitely tell what's been sensationalized, obviously. But the details in this book, even for the 1970s, to me are almost impossible unless you had immersed yourself in a Far Eastern Tibetan culture during that. And during the 70s, and especially during the 30s and 40s, when the story takes place, it takes place in the 40s, getting into Tibet was very difficult. I mean, it was not an open country.
It was closed.
Very much closed.
And there's nothing there.
Oh. And so what's being described in this story of Carl Robin Evans is fascinating, because you would have to have been immersed in this culture for a long period of time to realize what is being told to you, which is why the researchers is like, oh, this all seems like a hoax, you know.
Mm.
Interesting, because in the story, they had come here around 12,000 BC. They discovered, after this great war around Sirius that destroyed one of the moons through what they call atomic technology.
Oh, atom bombs.
It left this moon as a moon of mud, filth, rocks, and dirt. Very similar to what God Savara is talking about, where he comes from around Sirius. But the Lotus Sutra would not have been known to the author of this book. So there's no way that story would have ever come across his plate unless it came from this nomadic group of people. Okay. The scientists of the Sirius or Canis Major star system collaborated after this great war, and they built giant space arcs, these cylindrical craft that they called generational sleeper ships, and they sent them out into different portions of the galaxy to find other habitable planets that they could possibly terraform or populate. So here we have this 1 kilometer long generational sleeper ship arriving around Earth 12,000 years ago. They discover that Earth is very similar and very habitable to a planet around Sirius, but because our sun is different, the gravity here is very different. So they send down craft, exploration vehicles, right? These gliders
Oh.
to collect mineral, plant, animal, water, air samples so they take back to Sirius over these generations, getting back there, scientifically analyze, and then see if they want to send out, a colonizing ship in the future. While on Earth, we were going through the Younger Dryas at this point. So advanced civilizations that predated this, a lot of them had been wiped out by the Halcyon Comet event. It pretty much threw a lot of humanity back into the Stone Age. But Dropa are being attacked by the humanoids of the region. And of course, they kill some of them. They decide they're going to take some of them back with them. The young warriors find the human women to be beautiful, so they fornicate with them. And then they all return back to Sirius. Well, when the scientists are going through the mission logs and they're going through all the materials, they start to realize that the humans that they had brought back on ice, in a sense, are genetic cousins to themselves. And when they read through the mission logs that here they are having sex with humans, they're like, oh my God, there could be a hybrid race of Dropa humans living on this planet, 1,000 years away, traversing space through our generational sleeper ships. So they then send another ship, faster and more technically advanced, because it's many thousands of years later, back to Earth around 1040 AD. So this is when I believe they crash, and these are the mummies and skeletal remains that are found in the cave, are these parties from the second time that they arrived, because they got caught in our gravity well and they ended up crashing in this region. Well, right. And so they had to send out exploration parties. They're not used to the cold. They're not used to the altitude. They've got to find food, water, shelter. Some of the parties didn't come back. These are the people, I believe, that died, ended up in the caves being buried. There's an homage to them, obviously, from the locals as well, because they would have had to have intermixed and interbred with the local Kham Tibetan of the region in order to survive. And because there are genetic cousins, of course, they could do this. And so here we have this mysterious race of Dropa coming out of this precise region of Far Eastern Kham Tibet that don't speak any of the local languages, don't look like any of the local people, even today. And so this is where my research took me. And so, yeah, that's kind of, in a nutshell, the story of my research into the Dropa.
So are the Tibetans, like I saw in a documentary, like there's some underground passageway to Peru. And so that's why somehow the Tibetans and the Peruvians look alike. And
They have a very similar culture. When I was in Cusco, it blew my mind. I felt like I was in Nepal. In Cusco, they don't really speak Spanish. They speak Quechua, which is the local native language. and they're all very short in stature. They look like Tibetans and Nepalese.
And you mentioned cave systems. So Nepal has cave systems to Inner Earth, I've heard,
Yep.
to Agartha, and it's well guarded. And the Nepalis have one of the keys. They may be like one of the poorest countries in the world, but when it comes to the underworld, they're on top of stuff.
Quite literally. I mean, Kathmandu Valley is littered with caves. The current Rana royal family overthrew the Kumars because they came through the cave systems of Chobar and popped up behind enemy lines and surprised the Kumars and destroyed most of them because they had no idea that they were coming. They came through the cave systems, and so Kathmandu Valley is full of caves. I mean, Nepal is full of caves.
Yeah, and pyramids.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the stories of Agartha or the Inner Earth, Shambhala, Shangri-La, because we had a lot of researchers in the early 1900s going there. People like Madame Blavatsky, you've got Alice Bailey.
Oh yeah,
her study. You've got Nicholas.
They were beyond their time.
Nicholas Roerich, who was given a piece of the Sintamani stone and funded by the Interior Minister named Wallace. During, I believe it was the Truman administration or Roosevelt, one of the two. He became the Interior Minister, Wallace, and he funded Nicholas Roerich, this Russian theosophist and artist, to go back to Tibet and find out if there were entrances to Agartha or the underworld. They were very fascinated with it. And apparently in the early 1920s, when Nicholas Roerich was working in India, he was building monasteries for the Tibetans in India at that time, and they gifted him a piece of the Sintamani stone. And they told him to take it back to source and put it in the larger meteorite. And this instantly came to mind. This is the story of the dark crystal, right? The crystal cracked, and the only way to heal the crystal was to put back in the shard, and then it would heal the crystal. And so this is the story of the Sintamani stone, and it's different pieces of it are found all over the world. So you have the Kaaba stone in Mecca. You have people in the Midwest talking about this sacred stone that came from Sirius as well. So there's different shards of this stone. And then you have this woman, her name was Alexandria Neal, and it's interesting because she lived to be 101 years old, which in the 1850s, that's old. I mean, for that,
that's way beyond. That's double age of what people were living back then.
And so she's French. She was with her guide Yongden, and they traveled all over the Himalayas, the Karakoram, and the Xizang and Zanskar mountain ranges, which extend all the way into Pakistan and Afghanistan. And she felt that there was an entrance to Shambhala in the valley of Balkh. And Balkh is right near where the Bayam Bayam Buddhas were destroyed during when the Taliban decided to use them for target practice. There were these giant Buddha sculptures that were sculpted into the mountains. And sadly, the Taliban destroyed all of them.
Yeah.
But this is the valley of Balkh. And Balkh, Alexandria Neal, figured was one of the entrances to this sacred underworld. So it's not like
the entrances.
It's not like we haven't been looking for them.
Well, I think they're mostly guarded.
Right.
And usually it's by government 3-letter agencies or it could be by a religious group of people or something, but
could also be by the Nagas. And so the Nagas are these half human, half snake creatures that guard of Shambhala and Mount Meru. And so
there's guardians.
Each dimension has a different energy and a different energetic being, and they're all guarded by one form or another of the Nagas. Well, where do we find Nagas? We find them in the Egyptian culture. We find them in Buddhist culture, Hindu culture, South American culture. It's like
they're all over the world, just like the Syrian cultures are all over the world. Because like the pyramids, they all look towards Sirius for some reason.
Right.
And there's pyramids on every single continent. And in most countries there are, and some of them are not even talked about. Like they hide it. They cover it up for some reason. They don't want people to know about it. But why are they all facing it? That means that the Syrians had to have traveled to all these different countries. They weren't just outer worlds travelers. They must have been interworld in this world on planet Earth travelers. Because who else was building them?
Even even dimensional. And this is why astral projection is very fascinating, because it allows the meditator to have an interdimensional experience, traveling across the vastness of time and space to other planets, worlds, realms, times. You know, this all comes out of astral projection, which comes out of this, you know, very old and ancient Buddhist philosophy. So,
And do you think that they were using the pyramids to do this interdimensional traveling with the stones and how they carved it and the facing of it with the aqueducts and different things? Like, do you think that was part of the meditation, was using the pyramids to connect with whoever or whatever dimensions and back to their source home?
I would think so, because if you look at where a lot of these pyramids are, they're all next to water.
Yeah.
All sitting on major ley lines. And so here you have, you know, both physical and energetic magic.
Energy points. Yeah.
Like a geomancy of sorts. So it would amplify whatever technology or technique you are using in these meditative states. It would amplify that tenfold. I don't know if you've ever been to Egypt. I've been to Egypt twice. I've been in the Great Pyramid 4 times. The energy in there is so interesting, because you feel like you're not inside of a pyramid. You feel like you are in the vastness of the universe.
How about that?
You cannot feel the world around you when you're inside of the Great Pyramid. It is mind-boggling. And then everybody's toning, and so you have this vibrational, you know, expression that's bringing people into, you know, a state of consciousness. When you're in the king's chamber, the room tones at F. And then when you get in the box, it's A sharp. So this is a perfect reverse fifth. So if you're sharp and everybody else in the room is toning at F, you feel like you're being enveloped in this, you know, magical cushion of energy. So you have an outer body experience.
Oh, wow.
So that's
is how they do it.
Right. But you're surrounded by all this granite. And so granite under pressure will create piezoelectric or piezoplasma-electric energy. So you're bathing in this
sound bath.
Right, exactly. This field of energy that cannot be achieved elsewhere. It can only be achieved at these sacred sites, all on ley lines, all next to running water. And so, yeah, it really beggars the question, you know, what were we doing in our past? I mean, we look at technology today as nuts and bolts and things that we can screw together and things that work off of fire. But in the ancient past, technology was very different, I think.
Yeah, well, thank you for all that. And this has been very fascinating, listening to your world travels and to your research that you've clearly dug deep into so many different cultures and languages, and just, it's amazing what you've done. So if you're interested, definitely check out his work on his website and his books. And how can people support you? Is there a way that you'd like?
I should set up a Patreon. I haven't yet. I've been doing a lot of this research. You know, this is my pet project. I basically work graphic design all day long for multiple companies, and so I started getting into this research because it started to fascinate me. And so I'm slowly getting more and more involved and doing more research. I speak at lectures. I'll be speaking in Los Angeles, I think in March, at Alien Event at Biomed Expo, and then again October, also in Las Vegas. I have an event coming up in Big Bear in the middle of November with Walter Bosley called Lost Horizons, but a lot of it's going to be streamed in. I believe I'll be down there in Big Bear in California.
Nice.
November 12th through the 14th. And then I'm trying to get back into Conscious Life Expo in February. We'll see.
Cool.
I'm on the list because they got a full booking this year, which is awesome.
So go visit Hans at his events.
Yeah, definitely. And you can find me at megalithic.mysteries.com. There's stories about my adventures to Peru and Egypt there. I'm constantly updating it. I got to put some more of my past in Nepal and Bhutan up there as well. But I also do a lot of different blogs around symbology in movies. I like to look at movies and pick out symbolism in the movies that a lot of people might not see. So I've got some of that up there as well as some of the fashions that I design. So that's how you can find me. Appreciate it. If anybody reaches out, I definitely will get back to you. And thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having for accepting my invitation, Hans. I appreciate you coming on here. And if anyone wants to support the channel, there'll be some links in the description below, along with Hans's information. So go check him out, and we'll be soon to come. Thanks so much for visiting us on Miss Loisel's podcast. Bye for now.